He's a man that I've known for a while. I've read his book, I kid you not, it was a fascinating read. He's worked hard all his life to fight for good values and outcomes for families and and society in general. So I'm inspired and privileged to work under his leadership. So Family First core values are family, faith, life, freedom and enterprise. So all of those things are really important, and hopefully with a little bit of logic and common sense thrown in, which I think is, I'm not sure where it's gone. Anyway, so there you go. Thanks.
Great, thanks Morris. Well done. And Jamie, why not these other three and why the Nationals?
Thanks, Edward. It's my journey's a bit different to what you've just heard, although there are a lot of similarities between all of what you've just heard as well with the National Party. We're not the party for big government. We are the party for freedom within the members of the party. Unlike other parties, and I'm not suggesting the other three here, but individuals, MPs, have the right to disagree with a policy or a position of the National Party and not be kicked out. And we've seen not too long ago in the current government that's not the case. So that's a freedom as a member of Parliament, that you have to truly represent the needs of your own electorate. They may be a little different to others, particularly in a coalition government with the Liberal Party. My history or my background with the National Party goes back a long way. It's generational. I've had great-grandfather and grandfather that were members of Parliament for the Country Party back in Tamworth, very, very long time ago. And I've been a member of the National Party for a long time for not just those reasons, but also I truly think that the National Party are truly the party that represent regional Australians. Now I'm also married for 32 years, just a couple of weeks ago while I was campaigning. Haven't seen much of my wife for the last 8.5 months as I have been campaigning. We've got 4 children as well, 3 grandchildren on the ground and 2 on the way. And you know, I'm very, very proud of my family. We're all Christians, we're all Anglicans. I've served in the Anglican Church in Gunnedah for many, many years. My wife's taken over my position on Parish Council and other activities, particularly while I'm standing and doing this campaigning. But I've also, being a farmer, a small business owner myself, I've just retired. 3 of my 4 children have taken over the family business. I'm a boilermaker by trade, as you said, Edward. And I've also served as the Mayor of Gunnedah for 8 years. Now, in that time, I've seen the highs and lows of working both at a state and a federal level of some very good governments and some not so good governments. And I've seen the aspirations as brought forward by the community to the council with the hopes that the council will be able to encourage investment from state and Commonwealth government to deliver. Now, that hasn't always been the case. In the last 3 years, we've seen basically regional Australia defunded. In the Parkes electorate, and as I said, I've been campaigning for 8.5 months and I've been to every community over the population of 2,000. There have been some horror stories of businesses that have geared up because of projects that were funded under the coalition, commitments that were made that then funding was taken when Labor come to power. So that means insolvencies. That means businesses that have geared up, they've bought equipment, they've employed people that have just had to let all of that go. And that's put some of our regional communities on their knees. I know a coalition government, from my experience as a mayor, in 6.5 years that I was the mayor, when we had a state and a Commonwealth coalition government, we had almost $300 million invested into my community. And that was all because of the council representing the needs and the wants of the community. So that's why it's the National Party for me, because it's the only party that truly understand people in regional communities and what their needs are.
Very good, thank you. Now, as those audience questions are coming in onto the Slido, we actually have already 5 pre-prepared video questions on behalf of Christians around the country. And these questions are being asked of candidates throughout Australia at different candidate forums, so that we should know where each candidate stands on the same issue in every place in Australia. Now, we're going to play the video question, and then we're going to hear. So, the first video question? Now, these have been provided to the candidates in advance, so they've had time to prepare, just as much time as I had to prepare.
Religious freedom isn't just about what we believe in the privacy of our own homes. It's about the right to express those beliefs, to speak openly, to practice freely, and even to hold and express views that are unpopular. It also means not being forced to say or do things that are against our faith. And this isn't just a nice idea. It's a human right protected under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states that every person has the right to freedom of. Religious freedom isn't just about what we believe in the privacy of our own homes. It's about the right to express those beliefs, to speak openly, to practice freely, and even to hold and express views that are unpopular. It also means not being forced to say or do things that are against our faith. And this isn't just a nice idea. It's a human right protected under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, including the freedom to worship, practice, and even teach our beliefs, whether in public or in private, by ourselves or as a group. It also says that every parent has the right to teach what they believe to their children and have them educated in their faith. Australia is a signatory to this international covenant, and it is legislated as one of the 7 core international human rights treaties that Australia has adopted. Despite this, we have no national laws that protect religious freedom. Instead, we rely on a patchwork of laws that usually mention religion as an afterthought and often as an exemption rather than as a positive right. Right now, religious freedom is under great pressure. Beliefs that have been consistently taught for thousands of years are starting to be defined as harmful or bigoted, and laws are being enacted that restrict these teachings in the name of inclusiveness and protecting people from harm. For example, proposals for vilification legislation have been drafted with a new subjective test, where the mere expression of a religious belief could be punished if a person from a protected group might consider it harmful. In Victoria, laws have been made that make certain prayers illegal, and a government commission has a website listing what prayers are acceptable and what ones are not. Those laws could see parents punished for simply encouraging their child to follow religious teachings on gender and sexuality. Companies have followed the example of our governments, and people have lost their jobs or been punished at work for expressing their beliefs or even simply because of what church they went to. Trying to silence religious beliefs does not create a more inclusive society. Instead, it creates one that excludes people of faith. Australia needs a government that understands the importance of religious freedom and protects the rights for all people to respectfully debate and disagree on these most fundamental issues. Will you protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression, and conscience, and the right for parents to raise and educate their children in accordance with their faith?
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to start with a yes, but I will explain why.
Yeah, very good.
Firstly, I want to read out, in the National Party we've got a constitution, and in the front of the constitution there are 15 beliefs. So I just want to read out number 2, and that is, we believe in freedom of speech, movement and philosophy, freedom of religious activity, association and assembly, and equity and justice for all by the law. Now, I think that's pretty clear on what our beliefs as a national party are. My personal beliefs are, we're not a communist country. we're a democracy. We should never be forcing laws that we've just heard about there in other states that should allow some but not other prayers. I'm very fortunate, my wife and I were able to educate our 4 children at a Christian school. They were raised as Christians. We went to a Christian school. They've come through as outstanding young people that are contributing. In turn, they've kept their faith and passing that on to their next generation. That should be a right for everybody in this country. We should never persecute a person because of what their religious beliefs are. I mean, we all need to abide by the law. So that may be people that come from other nations, they settle in this country, they may become Australian citizens, they may not. But so long as they abide by the laws of this country, they should have the freedom to have their own prayers and their own religion.
Righto, thank you, Jamie. Morris, now just for those who don't know, the state government in Victoria is a Labor government. The Labor candidate Nathan Fell from Broken Hill couldn't make it. I did provide these 5 video questions to him in advance and asked him perhaps if he could provide a video answer response. I could play it on his behalf. He wasn't able to achieve that in the couple of weeks since I gave him those videos. You take from that what you will, but Morris, what do you say as to that religious freedom question?
Yeah, no, well, I stand by the rights of parents to choose and bring up and educate their children in accordance with their faith and ethos. Parents are and should be the primary guardians of their children. Parents are primarily going to be the ones who love their children the most. There is too much overreach by government. We need to stop that from happening. We need to protect the rights of parents to teach their children according to their faith. For example, Christians should have the right to teach their children that the Bible is the authoritative word of God and is a manual on how to live life. We have a Christian constitution, and our society has been developed on the guidelines based in the Bible, and that has led us to become a society where everyone is valued as being made in the image of God. The poor are looked after, children are educated, families are supported as being the basic fabric of a society. I know this is a bit of a statement, but I just think it's important to make these points. Most of the charities that we have started were started by Christians. Education was started by Christians to make sure that children could become literate and able to get good jobs and have a fair go in life. So many things that we benefit from are because of our biblical understanding. A society based on the 2 commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul and mind, and then to love your neighbour as yourself, is a society that will prosper. Schools should be a place where children can live, learn and enjoy community with other children. The curriculum should be about reading, writing, arithmetic and basic life skills such as budgeting. Radical ideologies should have no place in the education system. Family First will campaign to ensure that children are protected from harmful programs and practices such as radical gender ideology, which is harming young people across Australia and is in direct conflict with a faith-based ethos. We will put the best interest of the child at heart of public policy and let children be free to be children. In conclusion, Family First will campaign strongly for good legislation to protect that basic right of religious freedom and expression and conscience, including their right to educate their children in accordance with their faith without fear of reprisal. State and federal anti-discrimination legislation needs to be reformed so that the freedom of speech and religion is restored.
Righto, thank you, Morris. Stephen, what do you think about that first question? What's your perspective on the religious freedom and freedom of speech aspects there?
Okay, mine is going to be a double sword. First, it's going to be no. The reason is my family was a silent generation, so church governed that. So they took my grandparents away from their homes and their families. So that's a bit of a thing I don't like. But I watch kids who go to their school scriptures and all that. I think that's a great idea. I think it should be in the household, but sometimes out in public, it's where it goes pear-shaped. But I will support it, but that's my negative on it, because my family went through the trauma of stolen generation.
So when you say I will support it, do you say that people should be able to go out in the street and speak words from the Bible, or do you think they ought to keep that to themselves?
Yes, I have no problem with that, because I have a client who does that on a regular basis down the main street of Macquarie Street.
Yep.
I have no problem with that. Like, I have no problem with religion, in the sense that it's good for the families and children, but the past hurts me.
Yeah.
And that's how I always will agree to it.
Well,
So you can ask me a
Can
million questions.
no, can I say I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way about the church, and you know, I hope that one day we can reconcile with you because of that, and I think a lot of people here would share that sentiment.
And and one thing about my grandparents, they had 7 kids. 7 kids got taken away. Out of the seven, oh sorry, I've got the guy with the thumb. Had 7 of them, got taken away. Out of the 7, 5 came back. 2 were killed under religious law. One was a priest who ended up suiciding after what he did, and the other one is in a dementia ward after things. So
Okay.
that's always going to be a pain in my, like a thorn in my side. But these days, religion is a part of life, and being a palliative care worker, I lost the faith out of things. To see a little boy, 6 years old, riddled from cancer from top of his head to his toes. Where's God in that sense? And
Well-
that's how I lost that faith in it.
Yeah. Well, come and see us after. We're going to move on to Sally, but I don't want you to go. We're going to talk about that afterwards. Sally, what do you think about that first video question, religious freedom?
Thanks, Ed. Yes, I would work to protect the individual rights of religious freedom and the rights of parents to choose to raise and educate their children based on their faith and their personal beliefs and choices. The reason why is, above all else, as a libertarian, individual freedom and liberty is paramount. In my lifetime, my adult lifetime, as a child running around on a farm, this was not even a consideration, but in my lifetime as an adult, I have witnessed in Australia both our major political parties seek and demonstrate to us to use the influence and power of governments to gradually encroach on the liberty and freedoms of individuals. As a parent, education reform is of particular importance to me. I feel like our education system is frayed. Rural and regional communities have difficulty attracting and retaining principals and teaching staff. Our teachers are working under a heavy burden of administrative and reporting requirements and restrictions on how and what they can and must teach. These burdens are in many cases taking the passion out of our teachers. Educational outcomes are often low in rural areas. Our children are struggling to stay engaged. If I had the opportunity as a crossbench MP, I would advocate for out-of-the-box and libertarian thinking to educational solutions and reform, working towards a system that could be driven by educational choice and accountability. We need schools to have the freedom to offer unique educational opportunities and staffed by teachers who are passionate about those opportunities and not boxed in by government regulations and by set curriculums. I really do believe as parents we need choice. Just as we can choose a supermarket or a chemist based on what products we need to buy, we should also have the ability to choose a school that is in alignment with our personal choice in faith and offers the educational outcomes that meet the unique needs and the interests of our children. These are big and bold changes for us to consider and work towards, but as a parent, I firmly believe our current educational system needs a complete overhaul.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, one of the things about libertarianism, it's this idea of you're free to do things. There's freedom to do something, or there's freedom from something else. So freedom from your rights being infringed, or freedom to do something in particular. Proponents of some of the issues that we're talking about, sex discrimination, for example, might say that people who identify as a particular gender should be free to be who they are and free to apply for a job at the Christian school. And that's part of the libertarian ethos. Whose rights trump whose when you have freedom of a school and then freedom of a teacher to believe a particular thing?
So the freedom of everybody only goes as far as not impacting on the rights of somebody else and with no intention to harm somebody else. So in that particular example, both have the right. They have the right to apply for that position, but as a libertarian, the school would have the right to choose the person most suitable for that position. And if that was based on faith, then that would be suitable for both.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. Perhaps Jamie, if I could ask, one of the things that we talk about along with that question is the Sex Discrimination Act federally was designed to provide protections for people on the base of their sex. Most of the time it was designed to protect women from some sort of sexism that they might have been experiencing, either from work, during pregnancy, etc., maternity leave, all that kind of stuff. In 2013, the first female Prime Minister of this country, Julia Gillard, introduced amendments deleting man and woman from that act, deleting reference to people of the opposite sex and just simply replacing it with an identified gender. Now recently we've seen federal court action in relation to interpreting that section, and the federal court has upheld the rights of a transgender male to participate in a female-only app designed to protect the health of women and give them a private space, primarily because of the words of the Sex Discrimination Act. That seems to me to be some legislation that needs to be amended, and there needs to be something brought back to protect women in particular under the Sex Discrimination Act. Have you got any plans for that, or what do you think on that?
No, well, I wouldn't say I've got any plans. I mean, I'm really focused on this campaign to do the best I can to hold the seat for the National Party. Nothing beyond that at this stage. I want to be humble enough to think that there's an opportunity for me to hold that seat, but I certainly have no plans of what legislation I might want to see change at Parliament. If given that opportunity and that privilege to be the candidate that does win and hold the seat in the party room for the Nationals, I mean, they're conversations that I'll be talking about my beliefs, and majority of that party room for the Nationals, people that I know, have faith-based beliefs. And at the heart of my belief is that there are two genders, man and woman. And that's the way God made us, that's the way God planned us, and that's the way it should be, and there should not be, in my view, personal view, any legislation that says anything other than that.
All right, thank you. Morris, what do you think about that?
Well, I certainly agree with Jamie on that one, certainly the last half of his answer. As a party, we are committed totally to a binary society, male and female. I'm not afraid to stand by that. And I think once we get out of God's order, as we are travelling down that wrong track, society is going to struggle hugely. It's struggling now. And part of the reason I say that is freedom. Freedom is not an absolute in terms of society. We aren't free to do absolutely whatever we like. We are who we are. I'm made male, my wife's made female. And there's a point at which you just accept that and get on with life and contribute to society. So, I guess in essence, that's it. I just sort of, we're getting away from the absolutes as God planned them. God said himself, he said, I am who I am. Identity politics, where you decide that you feel a little bit differently today is against what you felt yesterday, and then you become political about it is one of the things that's grinding us into the dirt at the moment, so we need to get that sorted.
All right, thank you, Morris. What do you think, Stephen? You got a different perspective or not? No?
Actually, no, I don't. Because I see it in my work. I see male, female, and other genders. But it's even the documents these days has male, female, and others. To me, I can't work out why they have to have other. It's male and female. Sorry, that's the only two what comes in the picture.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just thing like I deal with. I think I have clients who are gay and lesbian. I'm not biased. I have to be level-headed when I go in to do my job. So I just let it about it. But yeah, I've always thought male, female. Then I started filling out documents for my clients, and then it's got male, female, and others. And I thought, why? It makes no sense at all. And to me, I think it's just we should just scrap all that other and put it on every paperwork, male or female. And supporting women, like the Students' Business Party, we had the biggest fallout over a situation what my boss said on radio a couple of years back. So Students' Business Party, we felt the thing. So we had the brunt of it. So everywhere we went, we had the brunt of your president wants to bash on the top of the head of a woman to give her more brains. Sorry, to me that's domestic violence.
Okay. All right, well, thanks, Stephen. Sal, you were the Woman of the Year. You're the only woman on the panel, as far as I can ascertain. Is there something to being a woman? I mean, should woman and man be in the Sex Discrimination Act if it's designed to protect people on the basis of sex? Or do you agree with the first female Prime Minister of this country?
No, I don't agree with her. Absolutely, men and women should be classified. I agree with my fellow panel members. There are two sexes. We are born man or woman. And I think it is important that we protect our women's spaces and our women's sports, and that we can compete fairly and not be at risk of harm from men. That would also extend to children, and I would be happy to fight for that.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you. Can we go? We'll go to the second video question, if we can.
Freedom of religion doesn't just include individual religious belief and practice. It protects our ability to worship and live out our faith together as a group. This means religious communities must have the freedom to gather, worship, teach, and serve. This is part of freedom of association, the right to gather together with people who share the same beliefs as you. Part of this right is the ability to create institutions based on faith. churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples, so people can gather and worship together. But faith isn't just about worship. We also need to build schools so we can educate our children in line with our faith, and charities so we can live out our faith by caring for others. Australia has a rich history of being blessed by faith-based institutions. Many of our largest charities, hospitals, shelters, aged care and aid, were founded as expressions of faith and still operate today because of their faith identity. Equally, the very first schools in Australia were founded by the church, and today 1 in 3 parents choose to send their child to a faith-based school, and that number is growing. These institutions serve all Australians, regardless of background, but they fundamentally remain religious organisations, built on faith, guided by faith, and successful because of our faith. But all this has been put under threat by governments and legislation that are trying to force religious organisations to compromise on their beliefs or prevent them from running their institutions according to their convictions. One of the most serious areas of pressure is employment and appointment of volunteers. At both state and federal level, laws have been introduced or proposed that would prevent faith-based organisations from preferencing employees who share and live out that organisation's faith. Our institutions are about our people. To be a faith-based school or charity, we need people who not only say they believe our faith, but who live it out in everything they do. Faith-based charities are not just service providers. They're mission-driven organisations that serve others because of their faith. Schools and colleges don't just teach curriculum, they help to shape and form students' characters in a set of values and beliefs. And Australians are increasingly choosing to send their children to schools who form their students based on faith. And school staff, executives, and teachers and support staff are the people who set that culture. Australia is greatly blessed by our faith-based institutions, educational, charities, and places of worship. But none of this can happen unless they can choose to employ people who uphold and live out their faith. So, will you protect the right of faith-based organisations, including charities and educational institutions, to operate according to their faith? This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith.
Morris, you want to start off? Oh, start off on this one.
Yes. Yes, hello. Yes, that's the answer. It's crucial that faith-based schools, churches and charities have freedom to employ staff who have the same beliefs and values. Now, this is not unreasonable. After all, we wouldn't expect the Nationals to employ a Greens employee, or for one of you other guys to employ an employee from another political party. It just makes logic and common sense, apart from anything else. So taking away the freedom to employ staff that support the school's ethos completely undermines the school, or has the potential to completely undermine the school. So the short answer is on that one is yes.
All right, thank you. Stephen. And Stephen, please keep the microphone up near your chin, mate. It's not going to get you. Go for it.
Mine is yes. The Shooters and Pissers Party, 96% of our shooters are nationalities from all over the world. So they have all their religions. We support all their religions. I just got one question to ask you. You said a question, you answered the question, but then you kind of reneged on yourself. So the reason I'm going to ask you is, why wouldn't you employ Jamie? And answer it properly.
Well, I may well employ Jamie, actually. Because you sound pretty good. Because I want to employ people who support the ethos and the belief system of my party. And that's why I would choose, and I think that's exactly why we're here tonight, because we have to have the right to choose those people and ideologies that suit our belief system and what we're wanting to achieve. And in this for your question, politically, yes, that's right.
Anything to add, Stephen?
Yeah. Just that question was really good.
Yep.
But yeah, that's kind of picking gender type ruling. So anyone from the Nationals, anyone from here, anyone from there, I employed.
Okay.
Because that's the way I am.
Yep.
Because picking and choosing who you don't employ for your company is a no-brainer.
Thank you. Sal, this is particularly a concern for a lot of people in the audience who send their kids to Christian schools. There is a steady and slow gaining speed, sometimes encroachment upon Christian schools, yet they are the fastest growing sector of schools in the country. This despite the fact that Christianity in numbers, church attendance is declining. People overwhelmingly choose to send their kids to Christian schools because the school will imbue them with Christian values and culture. That is the overwhelming reason. So where do we get to on federal law where people might try and implement legislation to say that a Christian school should have to employ someone who is antithetical to their beliefs?
I absolutely agree with the right for Christian organisations to employ based on their faith and beliefs. And I will go one step further and say that I believe all organisations and businesses should have the right and freedom of choice to both employ and terminate whoever they see fit, whether that's by merit, by beliefs and practices, or personal choice. Now, this is a long way from where we are today, but this type of policy change to be broad across organisations and businesses would benefit both employers and employees. Employers would build a team that are in alignment with their beliefs and values and their purpose. And ultimately, employees would find themselves in positions where they have more job satisfaction because they're in a role where they're in alignment with their beliefs and aspirations. I was a small business owner in Coolah for a number of years of a health food cafe, and I believe niche industries could prosper and thrive if we had the freedom to hire and fire based on our purpose and beliefs. So I would have no trouble at all fighting for this one, and I think the flow-on effect would not just benefit Christian organisations and businesses, but it would go much further and support our local economies and rural communities right across the country.
All right, thank you. Jamie, pass it along.
This is, I mean, obviously the answer is yes for me, and this is why I'm proud to be in a political party, the National Party, as I read out, number 2 in our beliefs, fully aligns with exactly what we're talking about at the moment. And and my wife, you know, we are very, very fortunate that we're able to send our children to a Christian school that had Christian teachers, where there was no conflict between what they're learning at home, what they're learning at school. And my belief and my understanding is that made our children and rearing our children so much better and made them stronger young people, and now turned into 3 of my 4 children are married and very stable families and great values, and they're great contributors to society. I'm very proud of them. I think we need to go one step further. Look, it's a political forum, so I'll talk about it. There are left-leaning parties that this is a solid platform for them. And on the right, centre-right, which is the National Party, this is something we would never support. We could never support the fact that we are discriminated in our schools, in our Catholic, our Christian, our independent schools, because we want to choose the right people for the positions that we've got that fit with the ethos of our organisation. So I think there should be some protections in anti-discrimination law that we could not be persecuted. I'll go that far to say that.
Righto, thank you. Jamie. Get the third. We're just going to move on to the third video question.
For more than 160 years, Anglicare Sydney has been dedicated to serving our community, providing essential support to older Australians, families in crisis, and those struggling with housing and financial insecurity. As the housing crisis deepens and cost of living pressures intensify, financial hardship is affecting more people than ever. Parents are struggling to put food on the table, families are being forced from their homes due to rising rents, and those escaping domestic violence often have nowhere to turn as they start over. Hardship now touches a broad cross-section of society: working Australians, people on income support, retirees, pensioners, First Nations communities, and culturally and linguistically diverse families. For many, this is the first time they've ever needed help. With an election taking place in the midst of a cost of living crisis, we know that voters expect real solutions. So that's why we're asking every candidate a simple but critical question. If elected, what will you do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk?
Can lead the way.
To me, it's yes. I've worked with Anglicare a fair bit in the past. Yeah, I really think that we need to build more housing in country areas to bring the prices of fuel down, food down, things like that. I've just done some research recently that there's 400 empty blocks in Dubbo. They're all owned by Department of Housing. These houses were houses and they're now burnt down. But for some reason, the government, I don't know why, won't build houses back on them. They get $58 million in the state to rebuild houses. And all the people are talking about housing, need housing, we need cheap housing, we need houses for people to move in, cheap rents, things like this. Why don't they do that? Why don't the government in the Department of Housing start building houses again? I was talking to a bloke in Sydney. They can make a 2-bedroom house, kit home, between $20,000 and $80,000 for 2 to 3 bedroom houses. Why can't they build these kits, bring them out here into Dubbo, bring them out to Gunnedah, wherever, in the empty blocks, put them in them and bring people to the towns. The towns are dying, and literally dying, like Coolah and Warren, we're in the same boat.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Morris, why don't we go to you? What are your thoughts? What could you implement to ease the cost of living pressure as outlined in that question?
Pardon me. Well, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. One is short term and one is long term. And obviously the short term is, I can, as a potential politician, I can throw in a few suggestions. We could, as has been suggested, things that are going to help in the short term, like a short-term fuel excise relief for motorists. I think that's a realistic option, just to give people a little bit of help at the bowser. But I also think that tax reform is something that, particularly for families, family is our focus obviously in our party, and particularly single income families where mum decides to stay at home and look after the children and dad's off, and so just one income coming in. So we need to be able to split those incomes for taxation purposes to reduce the tax burden on those families in those situations. So I think that's a realistic thing that we can do. That's on that. Look, I'll be honest with you, it's a really interesting question, but I see it also as a question that needs a long-term answer. And I think one of the biggest issues we're facing at the moment is energy and petrol, electricity, etc. It affects us in every aspect of our lives at the moment. I know my son said to me the other day, he said, as a farmer, Dad, he said, I've really enjoyed it, but at the moment I'm just seeing, how are we going to be sustainable into the future, particularly financially? He said all our costs are just skyrocketing. So you've got the homeowner or people, that are battling with obviously food, electricity, fuel prices, but then you've got businesses who are actually dealing with, it's a double whammy for them. They've got all of those pressures, but they've also got the pressures in business as well. You've got the cost of fertiliser, fuel, machinery, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. So it's a big issue, and a lot of that is related back to energy. So I think there's got to be some common sense answers on the energy front. I think we're going to be chasing this goal up in the sky of being completely renewable. It's not going to work. It's too costly, and we need to realise that the answer to a problem like this is, as usual, somewhere in the middle, where you take hold of all the options you've got, particularly in the energy field. So you've got renewables, you've got gas, you've got coal, and you've got the big N word, nuclear. Now, nuclear, it's interesting, isn't it, that the sun is nuclear, we are nuclear, this Earth is nuclear, the centre of the Earth is just a rotating nuclear blob, which keeps us all going. So we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should be prepared to explore those sorts of options and look at a full range of options to give us some energy security into the future. Energy is critical for the prosperity of a society. There's a direct link between the cheapness and the reliability of your energy to the prosperity of a society. So we've got to look forward in that way as well.
All right, thanks, Morris. Jamie, rewind to 2007, Peter Costello and John Howard out of power, the national debt was basically zero. Now, 2025, in the last 10 years, the national debt ceiling has increased. Successive governments, Labor and the Coalition, have raised the debt ceiling, then eliminated the debt ceiling. Currently, the Australian national debt is, I think, about $1 trillion. $1 trillion.
By Christmas, it's forecast to be 1 trillion.
Right. Interest repayments per annum, I understand, on that is about $20 billion per year. That's money coming out of the pockets of our children and our grandchildren and all of that. So what do you see as some way to ease the cost of living pressure and perhaps rewind some of that debt?
Well, before I answer that question, I was just going to ask Morris, have you been looking at the National Party policies? It sounds like you've just taken all of our policies. Because they, obviously Family First and the National Party have some very similar beliefs. But yeah, look, we agree, it is a mix of energy sources. A renewables only focus from the government, it's never going to be reliable, it's never going to be affordable, and it's not base load power, so there is no future for that alone in this current government's energy policy. It is all about keeping our coal-fired power stations open as long as we possibly can. Renewables, there's enough renewables already in the marketplace, we don't need any more. I don't think there should be any further approvals until there's a full assessment done of the amount of power that's already going to be generated out of those that are being built or have been approved to be built. There should be a stop, no more. Let's assess that. Let's have a look at what that impact is across the nation. And of course, gas. Well, we're putting $1 billion, we've made an announcement, $1 billion commitment into infrastructure to get gas, store gas in Australia for Australian use, which will be guaranteed baseload power. It'll be at the same locations where coal-fired power stations are, so we're using the transmission system. There's no need to build any more under the current governments. There's 28,000 kilometres to be built, and you all have to pay for it. It will never work. It will never be reliable. It'll never be affordable. And yes, the long-term vision for the coalition government is to have, we're starting this conversation in this election. If we do come into power, then that is a mandate for us to move forward on our greater conversation long-term around nuclear power. Look, to your point, Ed, it's not only forecast that we'll be in $1 trillion debt by Christmas, but in the next 2 years will be at 1.2 is the forecast by Labor. Now, they've always underestimated that. It would not shock me if there's 3 more years of Albo that by the end of that term it'll be more like 1.5 trillion. We have to be careful in the way that we make commitments. We have to be careful in the way that we respond, that we're not adding to the inflation concerns and issues that we've got. There is a whole heap of policy that the National Party have started, and to be honest, we're almost finished the announcements about cost of living relief. And yes, the fuel excise cut in half is one of those, Morris. We are guaranteeing that that will be for 12 months. And for the average home, if you've got 2 cars, that's a saving of $1,500 a year. And, you know, the conversation within the coalition is if it's needed for another 12 months, then there'll be 12 more months of a coalition government. We've got housing policy that is working with councils, $5 billion. And of that, across the nation, 1/3 of it, there's only one political party that will make this type of commitment to regional Australia. 1/3 of that $5 billion is sanctioned for regional Australia. That means 1.5 has to be spent in the bush. Now, you won't get that from any other political party, and that is to get infrastructure to service blocks of land that are ready to build on. So that will bring down the cost of price to either mum and dad who are going to build on that block of land, or whether it might be a developer that knows I can build a house there because I might save something like $100,000 and I'll be able to move that house on quick. There are many other policies. Actually, one thing I'm really proud of too that was in, you might have heard Peter Dutton's budget reply speech, $50 million we're committing if we come into power for food, for organisations that support food support for families in need. Now, we know that there are so many, and in my time campaigning, I've heard so many stories. One thing that really shocked me is the amount of people that are now living in caravans at the front of a house or in a driveway. Now, I've been politically campaigning for many years, supporting other people. I've never been a candidate myself, and it has absolutely shocked me to see the difference in such a short period of time that people, besides the conversations at the door, but the people are now, a greater portion of our community are either living rough, or going between different homes because they don't have their own home, or they're resorting to things like living in caravans in families, you know, existing families area. So I think we just have to be, as a coalition, I think we, personally myself, I think we're probably committing more money than we should be right now as a coalition in this battle to try and hold power. It is hard to watch as a candidate. Some of those things are very positive and they will make a difference to people's lives, but some of them unfortunately are inflationary. We have announced that if we are successful, for individuals earning under $144,000 a year or families of 250, you will be eligible for a $1,200 tax rebate in your 25-26 tax return. Look, I think that's a positive thing. I don't think that's inflationary, but I'm really concerned about the level of spending as a nation. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about their kids. Somebody has to pay for this.
All right, thank you. Sal, what's your answer to that? And keep in mind, I had a quick look at Petrus van der Steen's fiscal policy. He's for Trumpet of Patriots, for those who don't know. That's the Clive Palmer revival party this time around. He is of the view that a legislated cap on mortgage rates at 3% would solve some of these financial problems. What do you think, what's your answer to the question, and do you think the government stepping in and saying banks can only charge 3% mortgage rates will solve this?
I think the first step we all need to do before we talk about solutions is acknowledge the real problem. People are struggling. Families, our older retirees are finding it tough. But this is not a cost of living crisis. We are in a cost of government crisis. Every challenge we face today stems from policy and changes that has happened over the last 20 years, since the early 2000s when we were debt-free. And to face $1 trillion debt now, we can't just sit here and make financial promises as to how we can make your life easier. We need to look at the mechanisms that created these problems in the first place. And let's take away some of those. So I do have a few suggestions that I would like to go through, but I think we need to be realistic and realise that if we were taking over a sinking business and we had to pull it upright, then we would look at the fundamental issues first before we started outlaying money. As a Libertarian, the policy platform, and I agree, we would look at raising the tax-free threshold. We would abolish the fuel excise tax, but it would be permanently. Now, to make these tax cuts and impact everyday lives, we need to balance that on the other side. We need to look at the regulations that have restricted our businesses in the past, that have sent them to the wall, that have limited the creation of new ones, that have stopped our kids from going out on their own. We need to remove our net zero targets to start with before we look at which energy policy or which generation mode we are going to move forward with. Those targets will be the demise of Australia. That is the biggest commitment on my radar for this election. If we remove those net zero targets, we will have realistic timeframes for the energy transition. We can continue to utilise coal while we build other industries. Libertarians will remove all government subsidies from the renewables or from energy sources. We will remove the ban. Now, I can't sit here and promise that I can make that happen. I'm a potential crossbench MP for the Parkes electorate, but I will bloody fight for it. The Capacity Investment Scheme. It's a federally funded scheme that has funneled billions of dollars into this energy transition. The policy that has put us in this place today was started by the Coalition, has been furthered by the current Labor government, and here we are. In all honesty, I don't have all the answers, but if we don't get it right, we will all be in the dark together. The national debt, there's nothing that means more to me than seeing our country secure and sustainable for the future. And you only have to look at our kids and think about what the future will look like for their grandkids. My approach, and I think the party's approach, would be to really look at how we got to where we are today, look at what government assets we have, what do we really need, where are we putting money that really is a duplication or a waste. We have to dig into that detail, and the one thing I will do is to make sure that that is done transparently and that we have some accountability on how we do that. The biggest thing I would love everybody to take home is that we need to acknowledge those problems first, and then we can look at how we solve them.
Great, thank you, Sal. Where are you, Eden? Here he is, handsome man, purple cardigan. Is it purple, Eden? Blue. Okay, you're in a sea of blue over there, so I've got the contrast. Eden's got some audience questions. We're taking a little while on the video. Ball, you know, to Family First.
I didn't know that.
Okay, there you go. All right, go ahead, Merrin.
Okay, I've been given the microphone not because I'm special, but because I'm ignorant and I do not know how to use Slido. So, okay, this is my question. I'll read it out so I can articulate it properly. I'm very concerned about abortion in our country, and especially late-term abortions. And babies born alive after abortion are being left to die without medical care and compassion. What is your stance on this issue, and how will you address this if you are elected?
All right, Sal's jumping at the gate. Right, go, Sal.
I oppose late-term abortion, and I absolutely do not agree with babies being born alive and left to die. That is murder, and I would like to see our country stop that. Abortion, on the whole, the best people to make choices in our life are those that love us. And while I do very clearly oppose late-term abortion and babies being born alive and left to die, I would like to acknowledge the complexity of the issue, and if there was anything that I could add to that, is I do feel we have made topics like this even more difficult because of the regulation we've created. It's extremely difficult to adopt a baby or a child in Australia, and if we could make significant changes to regulations like that and allow families the choice, then I believe that would go a long way in reducing overall early abortion rates.
All right, thanks, Sal. Stephen, following on from that, are you aware that there was a bill introduced into Federal Parliament 2021-2022, a Babies Born Alive bill, to protect those that were born alive from botched abortions and left in the corner of the room to die, to suffer and die alone? That happens. We don't know how often it happens because states do not keep records of babies that were aborted unsuccessfully or even successfully. So we don't know how often it happens. Would you support such a bill, that the baby should be cared for if born alive? What do you think?
Yes, I would. I would support it. About 4.5 years ago, I actually got to see that. I actually got to see the child put in a corner and left. Like, he took 4 breaths, then passed away. So I've been there. I know what the anguish. But yeah, I would definitely support care for them. Give them the option of living. Give them the option of adoption, things like that. To me, just throwing them in a corner for like waste, and like this little boy was laid on a plastic hazard bag. So when he died, they just wrapped him up in the hazard bag, threw him in the bin. Didn't tell anyone? They do it all the time. And it happens. And it happens all the time. People don't realise that these things happen. And it upsets me a lot over it because me being what I do in my work, I see it all the time, so it happens. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it for anyone, but it happens. And hospitals can think, oh yeah, they don't keep records on it. The reason they don't keep a record on it is as soon as that child comes out and they put it over on, they turn off the system. They turn off that computer, and that's it. So that child could live a minute, 5 minutes, could last an hour before they die. But yeah, no one's thinking of them.
Thank you, Stephen. Morris, I work a little bit in the criminal law, criminal jurisdiction, and the more vulnerable a victim of violence or a victim of some sort of crime is, the more serious the crime is. We as a society protect the most vulnerable out of us. I can't think of a more vulnerable example than a baby born alive and left in a corner. It breaks my heart even thinking about it, to be honest with you, right? How did we get to the position where this is happening in Australia? Not only is it happening in Australia, but politicians often don't want to talk about it and want to bury their heads in the sand. They want to brush it to one side. How did we get in this position, and what would you do in terms of the Babies Born Alive Bill?
Okay. I knew the question was coming. That, in all honesty, I knew if Marion could ask it, she would, because it's something that's on our heart. I'm actually, when we start talking about this topic, I'm almost ashamed to be called a human being because of it. I see it as such a barbaric practice to deal with our own in that way. And the fact that it seems to be washed over by our supposed leaders, I don't quite understand that. For us, at Family First, we take the unashamed pro-life position of the fact that life begins at conception and continues through to natural death. So it's not complicated. It doesn't allow for the slippery slope of all these questions and unanswered questions of where do you decide, where is life most precious, or where can we make the decision about what we should or shouldn't do with this little life that's growing. So when you take that position, all of these other questions are answered. I know that for some people would be an extreme position, but the reality is that their estimation is that 80,000 little ones are aborted each year in Australia. That's extreme. So I haven't got too much more to say about it other than our position is pro-life and the sanctity of life, the beautiful life that God's creation. The other thing I would say is in thinking about this issue, I started to think about my own children. And if for some reason we had chosen not to have one of them, what would we be missing out on today? My quiver is full. My wealth is in my children, and the wealth of this nation is in our children as we move into the future. Please don't miss that fact.
All right, thank you, Morris. Now, Jamie, abortion law is a state issue, right? But federally, we have this bill. Should medical health practitioners, should hospitals, should those around a baby born alive be compelled by legislation as a reflection of the morality of this community to nurture and to give health care to that baby? What do you think?
Well, I'm pro-life. I think every life is precious. I've been a lot of instances in my family and in people that I know. I've had a daughter that's unfortunately lost a baby. I've had a family friend who've lived through the pain and anguish of a doctor telling them that they should abort. Their son was born, some early challenges, but now is an engineer in a mining industry that's doing exceptionally well, just got married, and a brilliant Christian. I can't see how any state or any politician could be voting for something anything other than supporting life, supporting God's gift. So yes, I agree, there should be laws that should, no matter the institution, private, public, any situation where there is a baby born, then there should be every attempt to keep them alive.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, sorry, Stephen, you got something else to say? Yeah, go ahead, mate.
A bit about me is my daughter was 5 months preemie. They were going to switch off support a lot because her lungs weren't form ready to breathe. So they asked that question, switch it off. I didn't. My ex, she took off on the day she was born. So it was up to me. I thought of my daughter. I sat beside my daughter, felt her pulse. So I said, no, you just need to do everything you can to keep her alive. So now she's 33 years old and got a granddaughter. A bit about this was she was born in the Royal Women's Hospital in Sydney. And because I was a man, I wasn't allowed to stay there. They were physically trying to push me out of the hospital so they could terminate my daughter. Because they knew that she had a 1 in chance of living. I sat on that bed for 3.5 months in a chair worse than this I'm sitting in. They argued, they got lawyers, they even got the police, they even handcuffed me to force me out of the hospital. Stubborn me, I turned around and walked back in. In the end, the nurses at the hospital said, this man cares for that kid. He needs to stay. Worst thing about it was I was so stressed, I was chewing on my teeth. I ended up with ulcers in my mouth and passed out. The next morning, when they took out half my jaw, I got there and here's a bed right beside my daughter. And I thought, really proud of that someone there went, he needs to be there. So my daughter's proud. Thanks. She lives on the Mid-North Coast, my granddaughter. So that's part of me.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for sharing that, mate. Eden, have we got another one? Who you got? The next best? Well, perhaps Jamie's campaign manager. Is that next on the list? After.
We have a question from Nick Herford, who...
Yep. Where is it, Nick?
I think Nick may have left.
Wasn't too keen.
What is your position on the current Criminal Code Amendment Hate Crimes Bill 2025?
Who knows what that is and what's your position on it? Criminal Code Amendment Hate Crimes Bill 2025.
I have a lot of concerns about this bill.
Okay.
Look around the room. Look at how old we all are. Have we really needed this bill yet? I don't feel like our communities need this bill, and I would be more concerned over who determines what hate is. I believe our existing laws protect us from those who seek to harm us, and I do not support this bill.
Okay, thank you, Sal. Jamie, perhaps you next. Eden, have you got any, who put this bill forward? Do you know? No. Anyone? Come on, you've all come to a political candidates forum. There's got to be some political... Eden will find it. Does anyone know who put it forward?
I'm not familiar with the detail. I'm not even sure if it's a federal bill.
Okay. It would be a federal bill. Hate crimes, I mean, we've seen it. Often we take our lead from the UK. We see laws enacted in the UK. A few years later, we kind of follow suit because, I don't know, maybe we can't come up with our own laws for our own country. We just copy from the UK for some reason. They have a lot of hate crime incidents or non-crime hate incidents that the police investigate in the UK. Non-crime hate incidents. I understand that some New South Wales policies have come in with respect to categorising things as hate incidents. For example, people might perceive when a church or a church practitioner says marriage should be between a man and a woman, a committed couple, they might perceive that that is hate speech towards someone who's not in a heterosexual married couple. It isn't. It is just an example of something that we hold as better than some other, or an ideal. Do you think that the federal parliament should be introducing offences based on hate or someone's interpretation of what hate is?
Yeah, very slippery slope. Look, where Nationals are the party of common sense. I don't know this bill. It's hard. It's wrong for me to be commenting on the amendments to the bill without having time to study that. I think that would be wrong, but you know, I feel confident, as I said before many times, very proud of the National Party, what our beliefs are, what we stand for. And the instance you just put forward, Edward, there's no way we could support that.
Morris, what do you think is, let's say, a hypothetical example, a National Rugby Union representative posting on his social media chat that a number of categories of people will go to hell if they don't turn around, one of which might be, for example, opining that homosexuals will, idolaters, etc., etc. Is that hate speech? Should it be outlawed? Should the government be saying he needs to spend a period of time in jail for that kind of talk?
Well, look, I don't know much about Facebook, but I think it was a private post to start with. It wasn't even a public post that he put it out on, and I think that is significant. But this all comes back to freedom of speech. It really does. That's what it's all about. Freedom to say what you think is good and what you think is bad. And we've lost that ability in Australia. I know personally 3 people are in court at the moment. One, because they said that a transvestite was an unsuitable person to be reading to children in a library, and he was been taken to court over that. The second one was a lady, and you know these people, but I'm not going to mention who they are, but the second one was a lady who said that it's not appropriate for men dressed as women to go into women's places. She's in court. And the third one, hang in there, is a guy in Queensland that was had a convention, a Christian convention, and he began his convention not with a welcome to country, but with some passage of scripture out of the Bible, basically saying the earth is all of mankind's, or is God's, and every man in it. And he's presently in court as well. So freedom of speech is under the hammer, and so consequently, yes, Family First are very much in the vein of wanting to get this sorted out. And just no, the answer is I don't know the legislation, but I suspect what they're trying to achieve, and that's the last place we want to be going.
All right, thanks. Stephen, do we need hate speech laws or hate crime laws?
Actually, I'm no to it, because it actually should have been 1945 when the Aboriginals came out. The hate crimes and all that against Aboriginals was in the past, so why bring it up now and make it a hate crimes in the future? To me, it's a no-brainer. Get rid of it.
Okay. Eden, yeah, a couple more from the audience if we can. What do you got?
Given this is an anonymous contributor, given the loss of individual rights and freedoms we experienced in 2020, 21, 22, how would your party protect individual freedoms during a potential future pandemic, and especially considering the emerging evidence of the effectiveness and background to many of the main pillars of the pandemic response, such as lockdowns, masking, distancing, masking or silencing doctors, stopping doctors from speaking and treating according to their best knowledge, vaccinating from 6 months, pregnant mothers, etc.
Look, a lot of that could be described as state legislation. So we had the public health orders, that is, the state parliaments enacted or gave power to the minister responsible under the public health orders to continually make and revise regulation. So we saw one law in the morning and one different law in the afternoon. There was no parliamentary debate, there was no assessment of the community and what they wanted, etc. This was the shirking of responsibility of the state government onto the shoulders of a minister who then listened primarily or only to an expert in medical issues, who, as I understand it, thought very little of the freedoms that underpin liberal democracies. As federal politicians, you can't do much about what the states do, perhaps. But what are your thoughts on the quick jump to the restriction of freedom driven by the fear of the pandemic? Stephen, you got a quick response on that one? Because we're running out of time. I've got to say, I hope it's not me, but
Ed, this was a horrible time for the country. I was the Mayor of Gunnedah at the time. I had enormous pressure as a leader of my community, being fed information from state government, also with the understanding of the guidance of the federal government and the medical advice that we were seeing. We were all basically waking up each day, turning the TV on or the radio and listening to what advice we were given that day. I was in the situation that I was frightened for my community. I didn't know. We turn the TV on, you see mass burials in Europe, all over the world. What's going to happen to Gunnedah at that point in time? What's going to happen to my family? And in that position, I took what I thought was the right choice, which was to encourage my family and my community to come out to the community hall and get vaccinated, to abide by all of the rules that were put out with masks and sanitisers and restrictions and a metre and a half away from everyone and all the things. Now we look back and think, well, that was just overkill, that was far too much. But at that point in time, nobody knew. We had no idea what we were in for. And as I said, the outcomes that we were seeing on the daily news from around the world is it was going to be catastrophic. In hindsight, we got it wrong. Would I do it differently now, knowing what I know? You bet I would. I think vaccinations are a right for individuals to make that choice. And the restrictions particularly put on those people in essential services like our medical professionals, doctors and nurses, and those that basically, if they didn't get the jab, lost their job, was a very poor decision of government. And we're still feeling the ramifications from that right throughout the Parkes electorate, with the loss of so many of our people in those skill sets that we haven't been able to recover from. The lack of time, or the amount of time it takes to train a person and encourage them, if they're not from regional communities, to come and work in regional communities. It'll take us probably almost a generation, I think, to recover from where we were before. So, you know, I'm not sure that answers your question, but they were extenuating circumstances in something that, you know, I'd never been through before, and most of the country had never been through before. And we were taking the advice on those people that were seen to be the experts in the field.
yeah, I think in fairness we can become more resolute when we look at things in hindsight. I've got to say that myself. I mean, I think I was quicker to acquiesce to government regulation than I ought to have been. But it's a very difficult thing, I think, for many Christians to come to the point in their life where they question whether the principles that they live by should supersede or be superseded by government law. Those two have really never been clashing before, and it is a very difficult position for people to be in. Sally, sorry, Maurice, we'll go to Sally. You're from a libertarian point of view. You think there was government overreach here, or do you think it was, that's the best we could do at the time? What do you think?
There's two sides to that. Definitely government overreach, and some of it was criminal. And those that contributed to that and knew, they should be held accountable. As community members, we relied on the information that we had and the stories that we could see around us. I don't think anyone did anything than what they thought was in their own best interests. Yes, it was a state issue, but federally, we have committed to non-government, unelected and unaccountable organisations, and one of those is the World Health Organization. If we stay committed to these organisations, we will find ourselves in another situation where we are forced to follow their guidelines and suggestions. Now, with hindsight, we have a lot of information. Doctors were silenced. Nurses and doctors who spoke up lost their job. So did emergency services workers. We today have an excess death rate that we can't explain. Our fertility rate is at an all-time low. Now, I'm not saying I know the answers, but our government needs to look into it and needs to transparently show the Australian population how and why we got to where we are today. And I believe those people need to be held accountable.
Thanks, Sal. I am running considerably late, and I appreciate that you guys are sitting here. We have 2 more video questions. I don't think I'll play them both. I know that you guys have prepared answers in relation to them. Could we just play the 4th one, Harry? Is that all right? Sorry, mate. Oh, you only have 3 videos. Okay, well, there you go. That solves that problem. We're not running as behind as I thought. That's good. Did you guys get 5? Oh, well, there you go. You've learned something that the rest of us didn't. Eden, what's another question, mate, from the audience?
This is my question, so please forgive me. I will actually read Audrey's question first. It's a little more brief than mine. So this is Audrey from Maine and Shane Kilby from New South Wales Farmers Dubbo branch. What is your policy on the live sheep export ban, on sheep from Western Australia being exported and banned from export from Western Australia to overseas countries, bearing in mind that this ban will greatly affect and disadvantage the livestock producers and associated industries in New South Wales and other states?
I'm happy to take that one first if you are happy, Ed.
Sorry, yeah, go.
Yep.
Yeah.
The ban needs to be lifted. We should have learnt our lesson when we shut down the live cattle export to Indonesia. I'm a farmer and I'm a girl who has loved animals since I was little. Animal welfare is important, but we can do both. We can feed the world and we can look after our livestock.
All right, thanks. Stephen, what do you think of the...
Yeah, it should be
Bill?
lifted. The live trade should be up and running. Like, you see the farmers, they're desperate to sell their meat. But the government's holding off. Like, and if you run 10,000, 5,000, 3,000 acres of sheep, like, it's a no-brainer. Keep the export going. Make the money, make the people happy. Like, my first job was an abattoirs worker. I was a cut trader. If you want to see some real nasty shit, you go to an abattoirs and then think about the live trade. The live trade is nothing like an abattoirs. So I'll give you a heads up, it's a really eye-opener change.
All right, very good. Thank you, Stephen. Maurice, can you just disagree with someone, please? Can we get some sort of argument going? I mean, what's going on here? Are you four all in the same party?
But I can tell you that I had a bit of a chat to my livestock agent, and he said he did a bit of a trip overseas. It's not just about us and the livestock. It's about the consumer, and that we're talking about the overseas consumer that eats this stuff. He said he went for a drive with whoever it was that took him around all the different places where the meat ended up, and he said they would have a little paddock with some sheep in it, and there'd be families around that paddock, and each day when they needed some meat, they would go and grab an animal and they'd slaughter it and they'd eat that meat fresh. The reason is because they don't have any refrigeration. So in a lot of places overseas, and they need protein, they need this meat. So I'm not saying it's the only solution for getting the protein into Asia, etc., but it certainly is fundamentally what they need at the moment. And yes, of course, for the Australian producer, we need that trade as well.
Thanks, Jamie.
Well, the National Party fought as hard as we possibly can or could at the time to see that this wouldn't become a reality. It did. That's what you get when you've got a left-wing government in charge. Our policy, we've made it very clear, is that if we come into power, we'll overturn it. When you look at what's happening in the world at the moment, tariffs out of the United States, 10% I believe it is on our beef into America, and the uncertainty about what's to come. This is an area, I guess, in our agriculture, which, of course, for the Parkes electorate, 51% in New South Wales, the western part is of critical importance for us and our financial viability going forward.
Great, thank you. Eden?
So this is a question I formulated myself. Apologies for the long spiel. It's kind of like a presupposition lecture and question all in one. But I'm privileged to be a father and husband to Jess and those 3 beautiful children, this one included. I'm also a health professional. Our generation has experienced an exponential rise in chronic disease across all age groups. For example, 1 in 2 males will suffer cancer. 1 in 4 couples experience infertility. Autism spectrum disorder affects, I looked this up today, 1 in 25 children, with a roughly 20% increase per annum. We are amongst the highest in the world in terms of the rate of increase. So 1 in 25, 1 in every classroom, increasing at 20% per annum. You could say it's existential. This article that I found in the Royal Australian College of GPs on April 2nd, 25, it's called Alarming. Study reveals kids' chronic disease impact. Research found 46% of Australian adolescents live with a chronic disease or developmental condition. The study published this week in the Australian New Zealand Journal of Public Health found that 45.6%, basically half, of 11 to 13-year-olds surveyed live with a chronic disease or developmental condition. However, one RAC GP expert has warned that most Australian children will be living with compromised health in another few years without swift preventive was a good word, action. This is not going to be 50% in another few years. RACGP Specialist Interest Child and Young Persons Health Chair Dr. Tim Jones told News GP, it's going to be the vast majority of young people struggling, and our current approach isn't serving them. Surveying 5,014 children from 3 Australian states, the most common self-reported chronic disease were hay fever or allergies, 23%, asthma 15%, while attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, was the most reported developmental condition, affecting 9% of respondents. Most of these conditions, from my perspective, are heavily environmentally influenced. We are an increasingly sick people. Which parent or young person considering getting married and having children doesn't wonder whether their child will be on the spectrum, either severely or mildly? You have to. Alongside this rise of chronic disease, we have become aware that our environment is contaminated with things like forever chemicals or PFAS, nanoplastics, carcinogenic herbicides like glyphosate, which we spray on our food, amongst and many other artificial contaminants in our environment, water, food, and medicines. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, or sometimes I refer to it, and no disrespect for those people who need it, an incentive scheme for some, is the result of this increased need and currently exceeds the cost of age pension and Medicare. From my perspective, many of the emerging chronic diseases are environmentally induced influence to some degree and are hard to treat, and therefore prevention appears to be the best way forward. Do your parties have plans to fund initiatives which aim to prevent these conditions, to work out what the main contributors are and go about resolving the environmental influences that are damaging and in many cases poisoning our young people?
Well, we were warned. Jess, I saw you looking around a couple of times. I thought, I feel your pain. Any
Yeah.
party policies on environmental contributors to health issues that we see?
Not that I'm aware of, Ed. Look, healthcare is obviously a huge expense to the country. Anything that can be done to eliminate the need for more money to be spent on healthcare, if there was a way to eliminate that, if there was a way to work out exactly what was causing some of these concerns, I'm sure that would be a policy of the National Party, that we want to see our people healthier. We want to be in the position that we need to spend less on healthcare. I don't know that that's a reality. I'm not sure that you can wrap all of that up into a policy as you've described that. But the healthcare of the nation, not just the people who choose to live and work in regional Australia, is important to the National Party. That's why we've committed $9.4 billion to Medicare. That's why we care about your health, your children's health, your grandchildren's health. That's why we're investing in our hospitals. That's why Mark Colton, the retiring member, put so much energy and effort into seeing the funding to work with the University of Sydney to see the Real Doctors training facility here in Dubbo, to find young people who live in regional communities, who want to train in regional communities, and then therefore studies have shown there's more likely that those people will go out and serve in regional communities. That's the work of the National Party, and that's where we'll focus.
Thanks, Jamie. Anyone else want to have a comment on that? Maurice?
I haven't heard it quite quantitatively stated like that in terms of the health, so thank you for the question, and thank you for putting, I guess, everyone in the room on notice on a question like that, really. I'm a farmer, I use glyphosate, we couldn't survive without it. We use it very carefully, and we use it within the directions on the label, etc., so that it's all done legally. So that question comes back to obviously the authorities that are responsible for putting those guidelines out. That's just in that one particular instance. But, you know, I just throw the question out there. You know, have you looked on that aerosol can that you spray under your arm each morning to see all the chemicals that are in those cans? Aluminium's one of them. I really question a lot of the things that are on the shelf in the supermarkets that we just use liberally, and we should be really being more mindful and careful of what we're using. And please be careful of just blaming agriculture for those sorts of things. Now, no, it wasn't just agriculture, but we're doing the best job we can. We're trying to be sustainable and produce quality food. That really is part of our mandate. So, but I think it's a really good question, so thank you for it, and it's certainly going to get me thinking and looking into it.
Thanks, Maurice. Stephen?
Yeah, for me, I've seen it in the palliative care side of things. I have one town I worked at in Molong. 3/4 of Molong have chemical cancer. Never heard of it at first. Now I found out what it is. So most of the workers used to work at the Shire Council dip. So they used to dip all the sheep and cattle, get all the poisons into them, and and I actually looked after a family who died. So the whole family worked for the council. They all got chemical. To me, I don't know how you fix those problems. Like, I think the governments are trying to fix them, but I don't think it's ever going to fully get fixed. I see it in being a care worker. I see the spectrums almost every day of the week. And the health problems, like I have clients who have 8, 9 different types of problems wrong with their bodies, and it scares you. And they have a pharmacist. They don't have a Webster pack. They come in a bulk form. Like I have a client who has a pack that's this thick of 49 different tablets. He takes in the morning. He takes 56 tablets at night. So he has emphysema. He has crystallized cancer. And then his other one is Reddick. It's called Reddick cancer. It's one of the rare cancers you can get in the world, and that was caused by friction on a train. So the powder used to put in old trains to slow them down the brakes got into this person's lungs, and yeah, he's the person you'd look at and go, okay, wow. But it's there, like the spectrum about disability and all that thing. It's there, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. You're not going to fix it tomorrow. It's going to be another generation of people in the future where they'll try to fix the problems.
Thanks, Stephen. Sal, any word on that?
Yeah, I could go all night on this one.
Okay,
I
how about-
won't. As a former Whole Food Cafe owner, this issue is really important to me. Let's just quickly, we get up in the morning, we make a cup of tea or coffee, the water that goes in our kettle, the tea that's in our tea bag, what the tea bag's made out of, the dishwashing liquid we wash our dishes, the clothes detergent you wash your clothes, the food you eat for lunch, the bread that you make your sandwich with, the air that you breathe. Every single thing we do can cumulatively add the level of poisons we are exposed to each day. And it is only with awareness that we can then make choices over what we eat, what we drink, how we arrange our home to protect us environmentally. And the biggest policy change that we can make is to allow freedom of information and freedom of speech around the known damages and the known causes that these products have on our bodies. The human body is designed to heal itself. If we could start with awareness, and if the government could support the availability of this knowledge, it is currently restricted online. The people who have learnt the hard way try to tell their stories. Mainstream media will not share their stories. Freedom of speech, freedom of information, I think, is the best way to start sharing the knowledge that we can make better choices and we can change our health and our children's health for the future.
Thank you, Sal. Look, I did tell these guys that, I did tell these guys that I would try to wrap up about 8:30 and then we could have some meet and greet out in the foyer for those that wanted to have just a private conversation with these guys. If you're busting and you think that by the time you get home, you're going to kick the dog and something like that because the night just wasn't what it was. Stand up, sir. Ask your question. What is it? Sally, you mentioned late-term abortion earlier in response to a baby's born alive. Have you got a specific date or time or trimester period that you would use to say this now qualifies as late term?
Look, my instinctual answer to that would be after 12 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, where did Eden go? He's still there. Look, I'm really sorry, guys, if we didn't get to your questions, but I think there has to be a point at which we'd say, yep, we need to wrap it up. We had to start a little bit late, 7 o'clock, just because I wanted everyone to have some dinner or something, and these guys have graciously stayed around until now 9:10. Harry, do we have the short video from ACL explaining the voting process? Many of you obviously understand how the votes work, etc. But I just wanted to play a short clip from the Australian Christian Lobby explaining how the preferential system works, how the system works, so that when you go into the ballot, you understand whether you should vote for a minor party, major party, etc.
As Christians, we need to vote for truth at this federal election. With issues such as freedom, biological reality, and care for the vulnerable on the line, it's crucial that we are well informed. AustraliaVotes.org.au has been developed for your benefit to support you in making an informed decision. This site will compare the policy positions of the parties on these issues and more, and will reveal the values of your House of Representatives and Senate candidates. To be good stewards of our vote, we need to understand how voting works. So let me explain. In a postal vote or at a polling booth, you'll be voting for a candidate to represent your electorate in the House of Representatives. And you will also be voting for a candidate or party to represent your state or territory in the Senate. Elections are typically held every 3 years for the House of Representatives and every 6 years for the Senate, with half the Senate being elected at each federal election. The winner of the election will be whoever wins the majority of candidates in the House of Representatives. Voting for the House of Representatives uses what's called the preferential voting system, where you will rank all candidates in order of preference. A candidate needs more than 50% of votes to win. At each round of counting, the lowest scoring candidate is removed and preferences are then distributed to other candidates until one secures the majority. This means that a vote for a minor party is never a wasted vote, because if they are eliminated, the full value of your first preference vote will be given to your second preference, and so on. In the Senate, which is the white ballot paper, preferential voting is also used. You can either vote above the line for at least 6 parties or groups, or below the line for at least 12 individual candidates. Candidates are elected if they meet a specific quota or number of votes. Any excess votes they receive are redistributed to other candidates in accordance with your preferences, with the candidates with the lowest votes eliminated each round. The key is you control your preferences. Now, this is really important. If you're concerned about a party or a candidate being elected into the Senate who doesn't align with your values, then it is really important that you vote below the line. Numbering all the boxes below the line with your most favourable candidates first and your least favourable candidates last, you are using flow-on preferences to build up a rival to overtake the party you do not want to be elected. The way you vote and who you vote for matters. So visit australiavotes.org.au to find out the values and voting records of your candidates, as well as a comparison of party positions on issues that concern you. Let's be prayerful as we decide who to vote for, and may Christians across Australia vote according to truth at this federal election.
Thanks, Harry. Look, oh, have I got? Is it this? No, it's all good. Okay. Look, can I just say a big heartfelt thank you to you 4 candidates for coming along tonight. You've really given us a lot of good answers to think about. You've sacrificed a lot of your time, It's not easy to stand up and stand for election in state election, federal election, whatever it might be. I know that you put in a lot of work behind the scenes. I know that you sacrifice a lot of your time, your hard-earned money, your effort, and this community, I know, really appreciates that effort that you've put in, regardless of whether you end up winning the election or not. So big thank you to you for coming along. Thanks, guys. And I might just close in just a word of prayer if we can. Lord, we thank you for bringing us together tonight as we're on the eve of a federal election. We pray for all of the candidates who put in their time, their effort, and we hold them up to you. Lord, one of these candidates, one of the candidates out of the 10 will be our representative in federal parliament. Lord, we pray for that person. We pray that they will, in federal parliament, stand up for truth, stand up for their communities and be people of principle. Lord, we thank you for these people tonight. We thank you for bringing us together, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Look, that's it for tonight, guys. I think hopefully a couple of the candidates are going to hang around just in the foyer for a few minutes. I know that I promised that would be about 8:30ish. If you want to say hi, say hi. You heard how important it is that we